So Prashant, I typically like to start with introductions, so why don't you go first and I'll go after.
All right. So before I start, I got to say, so first of all, thank you guys for having me here.
Of course.
My biggest problem coming into this was, what do I wear for a fireside chat? So I don't want you guys to get the wrong impression. I don't usually wear this at the fireside. So a little bit of background on me, and I was telling somebody beforehand, I often struggle with introductions, for myself, because it's what do you say? Do we keep it short and keep it on the business level, or do I give you some narrative so you actually know who I am? So I'm going to give you guys just a very little bit of narrative here. So from a business perspective or career perspective, I'd say that my career started when a cousin of mine came and saw my room and realized, and it basically saw that it was a total disaster, and asked me about it. And I said that, well, if by not worrying about this and just letting everything go, it makes me more spontaneous and gives me a greater opportunity to be creative. And he told me that there's about this concept called freedom versus constraints, and basically that constraints in one dimension create freedoms in others. And so I thought that was pretty interesting. And he said, well, if you get organized, then you won't have to worry about anything else, and you'll be able to focus a lot more of your attention and energy on being creative. And so I thought that was pretty profound. And so at the time I was working for a logistics company in Detroit, and I decided that I was going to get organized. And now, about like 20 years later, I'm still trying to figure out how to do that, completely. But there's hope. And so I ended up kind of moving from a logistics consulting field into project management. And then in 2000, I moved to New York. And I started a project management consulting firm, and basically my client was the company that I used to work for in Detroit. And then being here, you network, you meet with people, and I picked up other clients like Time Warner and Chase and JetBlue, and then Planned Parenthood, who's one of our clients today still, and ended up doing a number of large projects for them. And I realized that I needed to be efficient if I was going to handle the workload that was coming my way. So since my cousin had told me that, the concept of freedom versus constraint, I'd been obsessed with productivity. So I'd read a lot about it, and I started applying it to the work that I was doing. And so I ended up developing a set of techniques, so one for email management, so how do I stay on top of all the hundreds of email messages that are coming my way, one around meeting management, meeting facilitation, and then a methodology for applying personal productivity techniques to the area of project management. And the result was that it kept me a lot more sane when I was managing these really high-pressure critical initiatives. And then about 5 years ago, my customers just saw how effective those techniques were and asked me to come and start teaching them. And so we put together a set of courses, and we kind of moved from being a project management firm to a productivity training and transformation company. And so that's a little bit about me. From a professional perspective.
Yeah, no, great. Thanks for being here today. I'm Deepak Alwani. I work as a management consultant. I work as an independent management consultant with Deepak Alwani and Associates. And then prior to that, spent a lot of time in consulting with Accenture, as well as a couple of mid-sized consultancies before I went on my own. So with that said, let me get started with the questions. Can you name a person who has had a tremendous impact on you as a leader? Maybe someone who has been a mentor to you. Why and how did this person impact your life?
So I'd have to. So there's a number of different people that have had impacts on me as a leader. If I had to pick one person, it would probably be a gentleman by the name of Joe Coughlin. And so he was the CEO of this logistics company that I was working for back before the turn of the century. And Joe, what I thought was fascinating about Joe was that he was a visionary, but he was also really kind and patient. And I'd seen and worked with a lot of executives that were demanding, intolerant, and really pushy. And I saw what a difference it was to be kind and patient, and then also be a visionary on top of it. I thought that he got better output out of everybody, a lot more loyalty for the firm. I thought that everybody wanted to do something great for Joe, and then the result was that cumulatively that ended up being something great for everyone. And so that made a huge impact on me. And you know, on the professional side, I thought that from being a visionary perspective, that he also took on initiatives that companies are only picking up, that are picking up today. So for him, culture was incredibly important, and he really focused on creating a culture where everybody felt invested in the business. And
that's great.
Yeah, and he took on other practices, like he built a meeting management group at that organization where if there was any meeting over 10 people, they'd be able to bring in an internal facilitator to manage it. And I thought that made such an incredible difference for basically greasing the wheels, the internal wheels of the organization, and helping things run faster. And I haven't, aside from companies that we've helped in those regards, I haven't seen those practices applied elsewhere. So, you know, that's who it would be.
What would you say are the most important decisions you make as a leader of your organization, Double Gemini?
I would say priority and scope. So, with respect to priority, so I think it's pretty important that when somebody has competing tasks, they know exactly what to focus on next. And this, you know, I'd seen a lot of people prioritize, or a lot of business leaders prioritize by just considering projects or operations high, medium, and low. And that didn't work too well, because when they're competing, two things competing for the same time frame, you know, it really wasn't going to work out. So internally at Double Gemini, we prioritize by projects, but by number with each person's initials next to it. So Alessandra on my team knows what her first, second, third, and fourth priority are, and then so on down the line. And I think that's really valuable, because when she has competing priorities, she knows what to do. It's harder for me because I kind of feel like everything's a high priority. So it's harder for me, but I think that from a leadership perspective, that's incredibly important. And once we started using that prioritization practice, I felt that everything moved faster, and there was also less conflict, because it wasn't like, well, why did you work on this instead of working on that? You know, I set those priorities, and you know, and I don't just set them out of the blue. You know, we have a discussion about them. And then scope. You know, you can take anything, any type of project that you can think of, and the scope could be this big or it could be that big. So take a website. You know, you could do a quick website that just covers all the key points about your business, or you could spend a year building, you know, a masterpiece that's going to win a Webby, right? So I think that one of the most important decisions I make is when is it important to focus on done over perfect. And so when do we narrow the scope and say, let's just, you know, do this quickly and have it be good enough, and where do we need to concentrate our efforts and really make the work stand out. And you know, by focusing on those two things, especially in the last 4 years, we moved a lot faster as a business with a lot more clarity. So
yeah, so priorities and scope. Which is the most important to your organization? Mission, core values, or vision?
That's interesting. You know, I think about strategic planning is one of the services that we offer at Double Gemini, and so I'm really interested in that field. So I'll answer it one way, and then maybe I'll take a variation on it, or add some context. I think that between those three, mission, vision, and core values,
Yeah.
I would have to say that it would be core values.
Okay.
And
Okay.
the reason is because if your core values don't come from a place of good intention, I think there'll be a couple of downsides on the back end. So one is, if you're successful, then you won't enjoy it. And if you're not successful, it will be because your intentions weren't aligned with what was best for everybody. And at the same time, I think that having a good vision is critical. And we don't like to just develop visions. We actually like to put together 5-year vision views.
Okay.
Something a little bit more graphical, with graphics and diagrams, so that people can clearly see it. It's very hard to motivate a company with just a vision statement. But if you paint a picture that says, this is what our customers are going to look like, this is what our operations are going to look like, our products and services are going to look like, that gives a lot better sense to everybody in the organization of where you want to go. So I would say core values.
Core values.
Yeah.
Like what's one or two that are especially important to you as a leader?
I think putting people first.
Okay.
So
is that employees? Is that customers?
it's both.
Okay.
So for customers, if we've got a customer that's in need and they don't have the budget for something, but it's incredibly critical to them, we have no problem with just doing the work to help them out in the short run. I always figure that things will work out in the long run. So last year we did 100 hours of work in a particular month for a customer that needed some help where we weren't going to get paid for it.
Right.
But we felt that it was really important for the long run, not only for the customer, but just for kind of the benefit of the things that they were doing.
Yeah.
To focus on that, and then also for employees. So we've had employees that when we run into situations like, for example, if an employee has a family member that's sick, we don't count the time that they take to go care for them as vacation time. We give them the benefit of the time that they need to spend with their family, so they can actually do what's necessary. And I always figure that it'll all work itself out.
Right.
In the long run.
So it sounds like goodwill with customers, which is a challenge, but goodwill with employees, do you find like that karma comes back? I'm curious.
Yeah.
Because I'm sure it's hard for a lot of people in New York who are so driven and pressed for time. Do you find providing that goodwill to customer employees comes back?
Yeah, I would say that I don't know that I could say that I could, it would depend on how you view it coming back. Like, I don't know if I could say that it came back financially,
Okay.
as a financial benefit, although I think that our clients understand our intentions, and so as a result, they like to work with us
Okay.
for that reason.
Right.
But I would say that it gives me a lot of confidence in knowing that I did the right thing. And so I can really sleep well at night, knowing that I'm not counting every dollar, and and I'm valuing the organization based on the number of people that we're able to help, both internally and externally. So and that peace of mind, I think, goes a long way to giving me greater mental clarity and the ability to create new techniques and products and services that are going to help people.
So you find it motivating. It sounds
Yeah.
like it's a morale booster for yourself and your team.
Yeah, it feels like the right thing to do. Yeah, I don't know that I've completely dissected it, but I think that it feels like the right thing to do, and feels like something that is missing. I read reports all the time of companies laying off people when
Sure.
they're having record profits and so on, and
Right.
I've worked with people that have cared about every single dollar, and I just think that there's a better way to live.
What's one characteristic that you believe every leader should possess? Integrity, maybe?
Yeah, I think integrity is important. I think that I kind of view that as I view integrity as just something that's like a fundamental thing that if you don't have it, then whether you're a business leader or not, you're probably not going to go very far, or eventually you'll be caught. I I would say confidence and
Competence?
confidence.
Really?
Confidence, yeah. So as a leader, I don't think that you need to be the smartest person in the room, but I think that if you don't have the confidence in your ability to make decisions and the confidence in your ability to do the right thing and I don't think other people are going to look at you as somebody who's kind of fit to lead the group. And that doesn't mean that you have to be an extrovert either. You know, you can have quiet confidence and still lead, but I would say confidence. I think that in my first few roles, leadership roles, that I just didn't have a lot of confidence in, and it showed. I somehow managed to, still drive progress, but I think that once I got my confidence, it was a game changer. I mean, you see this with athletes all the time. Like, once they got their confidence, there's not a shot that they can't hit, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
rather than having to do something with their skill set.
Yeah. So I think that it's important to have confidence.
Last question on leadership. What advice would you give someone going into leadership position for the first time?
So this advice would be based on a philosophy that I found had a profound impact on how I viewed myself as a project manager. So a friend of mine came to me and he showed me a triangle, and he said that a lot of leaders picture themselves at the top of the triangle with their resources on tap. And he said, what would happen if you inverted the triangle and management was a support function for the people that you were working with? And when I thought about that with respect to project management, it was a game changer, because I realized that, as a project manager up here, all I was doing was basically making sure that people had tasks assigned to them and then driving them to completion.
Right.
But then when I flipped it, that it meant that I would have to provide a set of services that would clear obstacles and make it easier for them to do their work. And I think that if you were to apply that to just general business management, that it would go a long way. People will respect you. They'll realize that you've got their back covered. You're not thinking about. You're thinking positive. It forces you to think positively about the work that they're doing. It would give you empathy for the work that they are doing and understanding, so that you can put in place the right technology and processes and practice to allow them to get their work done faster. And in the project management world, it's had profound effects. I mean, we get our projects done at a remarkably higher rate of on-time completion than what I see typically in industry newsletters. And I think that a lot of that has to do with that particular philosophy.
Right.
And so, for a new leader, I would say that adopt a philosophy that will set in place, that will basically create the foundation for you to take actions that are going to be beneficial for other people. And I think that that it'll yield fantastic results.
I know Double Gemini being a productivity consultancy firm, what would you say is Double Gemini's top 3 business priorities going into 2017? That's
a very tough question to answer. We actually have a prioritized list of initiatives too, but that list looks is evaluating our projects. If I was to summarize it, I probably would say the first is that we've developed a set of productivity practices around emails, meetings, and projects. And I want to codify those practices and put them into software. Right now we use off-the-shelf software that we've pieced together to apply our philosophies, and I think that it would be a lot more efficient if we were able to have software that fit our practices a lot better. So that would be the first one. I think then the second one is to continue improving the way that we execute projects. If you've got an efficient mechanism for executing projects, it doesn't matter what you put into the pipeline. It means that you're going to be able to get it done faster.
Right.
And then the same thing from an operational perspective. Just improve our operational processes so that they allow us to scale and be more efficient with how we do things.
Okay. So technology to kind of semi-automate your processes, continued focus on execution, and the third one was?
It's actually really also continued focus on execution, but one is from a project perspective and one is from an operational perspective.
Okay.
Yeah.
Working as a productivity consultancy, you must have a point of view working on productivity with your clients. What's your philosophy on organizational productivity?
It's interesting there because you use the term organizational productivity.
Right.
And so I think that a lot of people, when they look at productivity, they see the self-help books on the bookshelf or on Amazon, and they think, okay, so I need to be better at time management, and I need to be, have a better task list or be better at managing my calendar. And it doesn't work. It doesn't work in organizations because we're all dependent on each other's time. So the philosophy that I would say I think is most important is for organizations to realize that productivity is a team sport. So that means that they have to have a shared way of looking at how they manage time, a shared way of how they manage interactions and communications through meetings or through email, a shared way of how they even organize their files. I think that they too often they leave it up to individuals to work on their own. But if an individual puts in place a certain set of productivity practices, and other people in the organization don't value those practices, it'll get trumped.
Right.
A really good example is...
Or identify with them.
Yeah, or identify with them. A really good example. So email takes up, according to a McKinsey study, email takes up 28% of the average worker's work week.
Wow.
in America.
30%.
Yeah, almost 30%. So that's, according to McKinsey, it's 650 hours a year. And I have yet to meet somebody who has email time blocked on their calendar, even though it's a third of the time that they have to spend at work. And so what it means is that they have to spend time in the evenings and the weekends. And then often when we do our training, people will book it on their calendars, but people outside of those groups won't value it. They'll just see that it's email time. Oh, I can schedule a meeting over it. And so that's an example where being productivity is looked at individually instead of as a team sport.
Right.
And there's so many upsides to being able to block the time and batch process your email, because then you can cycle through it a lot faster and create more mental clarity and space for getting your other work done. And that's just a small example. I've countless examples that go along.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's something I can work on too.
Yeah.
In your research in productivity with organizations, what have you found, and what would be some general productivity advice to organizations?
Okay. So
you talked about 30% with the McKinsey study, and if they use that time to batch all the emails and getting through them. So what else have you found?
Yeah, so when we go into organizations, and I mean, you guys all work for organizations, how many of you guys have an office that's just devoted a team at your organization that you can go to for email productivity? Any of you? How about meetings? No? Okay. So, so I think that there's shared departments. There's IT, right, that deals with all your technology, and there's human resources for your benefits and payroll and onboarding, and then you've got finance that does all of the things that they do. But if you look at meeting time, just as an example, it's 28% of the average person's work week. If you look at meeting time, you're talking between 35 and 50% of an average person's work week is spent in meetings.
Okay.
And so these are huge areas. These are the things that consume the majority of people's times, and yet I'm not aware of any organizations that actually have dedicated meeting management offices or email management offices to address these things and make that time more efficient.
Okay.
And help people value it from a team perspective. I think that's the most surprising research that finding or conclusion that I've come to, is that the things that take the majority of people's times aren't investments from a corporate perspective.
Right.
So
it's like a SWAT team or a continuous improvement team just on meetings and emails.
Yeah. There's
Because it takes up a double-digit percentage of people's time.
Double-digit percentage. So meetings, you go into meeting rooms and they're not configured properly. There's no screen. There's no
Agenda.
There's no agenda.
Right.
So it means you're going to have 2 meetings or 3 meetings just to cover the same set of topics.
Right.
There's you take onboarding. People get onboarded into an organization, and there's no group that says, hey, here's some training on how we run our meetings. This is what you can expect when you come into our meetings. And and the same thing with email, so that they're actually just onboarded and ready to be productive and efficient members of that organization. I think that the other thing that's fascinating about it is that by adopting those practices, you actually change the culture for the better, because people have a common language and patterns and ways of working together that make everything just so much easier. Teams that we go into and that we provide these meeting practices, they literally see their cultures change within weeks just by adopting a really, really simple set of practices. I'm not talking about weeks of training. I'm talking about a half a day of training and a little bit of focus on setting things up right. And
so a common approach to meetings as well as tackling emails, like a common framework.
Yeah, and putting in place a team who's responsible for maintaining and managing that culture. Even in small companies, it could be revolving team members or a committee. And in large companies, I think they should have dedicated people that are focused on those areas. I think that the potential for the return on the investment is tremendous. So that's how I would answer that. Yeah.
Let's move to questions. Questions from the audience?
It's interesting. So from the email perspective, so I'd read David Allen's Getting Things Done.
Sure.
And I don't know, probably a lot of you have heard about that book. Met him a year ago.
Did he ask you to hurry up or?
No. But so what I saw with that was that he had a kind of a generic process that he wanted you to apply to anything. And when I started trying to apply it to email, I found that it didn't work because email had its own constraints and patterns and functions that worked well within email. And so I really needed to create my own custom solution for email that was designed to work with email programs. So that would be, so I started with that with his model, and then I dramatically changed it once I realized how specific I needed to be with respect to email. With respect to meetings, I had learned some techniques from a gentleman named Dr. Kraft Bell, who worked with the Interaction Associates, and they were pioneers in the meeting facilitation business in the 80s. And his techniques were more focused on organizational change management. So I kind of consolidated that into a smaller set of practices that were just focused on the everyday business meeting, and fine-tuned everything that I was doing to be really efficient for that space. And then with respect to project management, most of the innovations that we made, or I had the fortune of making in terms of project management, were really through question and answer and trial and error. So once I realized that I should be using that inverted model, I started asking a whole different set of questions about project management. So how come nobody ever looks at a project plan? Why is it just the project managers that care about it? So I said, well, that's because project plans are unreadable. There are all these like Gantt charts and lines that go on forever. And what if we collapsed it and made it really simple, so no more than 2 levels of hierarchy, used colors and fonts and a structure that made it accessible to everyone? Would that change things? So then it comes into the trial and error. So I had to try a whole bunch of different patterns until I got people to actually take a look at and engage with those project plans. And so I kind of kept asking different questions based on things that I found were challenging me from a project management perspective. Why isn't I getting buy-in on the process of doing charters? Why does no one want to show up to a planning session? Well, nobody likes planning because they think it's a waste of time. But if we call it an organized session because everybody cares about getting organized. So it's just through a lot of little changes like that that we started making improvements, and then kind of took it from there. The first thing is just to make sure that we've got executive support for it, or champion, because if the people at the top of whether it's a company or the organization or just the company or the division or the team don't buy into the philosophy, it's never going to work. I've set up the same PMO for the same team twice, and it still didn't work because they didn't buy into it. But so I think that's critical that happens. And then we've designed our engagements in such a way that it really dramatically increases adoption. So we don't just teach the class on email management. That's 3 hours, right, for that class. But then after we teach the class, we offer people the ability to attend 10 practice sessions so that they can adopt the actual techniques. And we've put an incredible amount of investment, probably over 2,000 hours just in designing that 3-hour class. And then we offer all those practice sessions so that people can adopt it and get excited about it, because if the fewer people that adopt it for a team and actually put it into practice, then the harder it is for everyone else, on the team. And so we've gotten to a point where we can get 85% adoption rates, which is really good. And then from an organizational perspective, we set up an email management office, and or we help organizations set one up. So it could be a revolving committee or a specific or a dedicated team. And then what they do is they actually, we train them to do a couple of things. So the first thing they put together is policies. So policies that make it safe to not answer emails on weekends, for example, or when you're on vacation. So that protects people's time. We help them with onboarding support so that as new people get onboarded, they have a script for how they onboard them with respect to the email policies, and then how they funnel them into actually getting training. And then the third thing we do there, as an example, is we teach them how to run this thing called Stack Spaces. And so, and they set this up and they run this on their own. And the way that works is they book a calendar time, and it can be 3 days a week, 5 days a week, twice a day, it doesn't matter. But they book calendar time where anybody can dial into a conference call and they can process their email, and it's protected time from a corporate perspective. And they treat it, it's almost like a workout session. So, hey, who's on this call today? Great, we're excited. As soon as you've cleared your inbox, let us know. And they kind of keep it moving, and the person who's hosting it can be a different person, but they keep everybody motivated. Everybody knows that everyone else on the call is doing it at the same time, so they can stay focused, and that time is protected so they can actually batch process their emails, and so it gets valued from an organizational perspective. So it took a while to figure out how to put those patterns in place, but that's how we do it with email, and then we use different techniques in the project from a project perspective or meetings perspective.
All right, everybody, Prashant Nair, CEO of Double Gemini, thanks for your time.